Okay, hopefully be able to see my presentation slides. Great. So there's also my Twitter name there. The good thing about my name is there's only me really with this name. So if you Google me, you should find all my things online, my website and my blog and anything else I've done. The other two things for, if you are on Twitter, I recommend is the hashtag ACRIMO. So that's for Academic Writing Month, which is in November. And then ACRI, Academic Writing. There are lots more hashtags as well, and I will share a couple more later on in this presentation as well. And I recommend that you have a look if you are on Twitter, and I will share some other social media things as well. So there's some Facebook things I might share. Yes, I'll also be happy to share the PowerPoint slides, but I think the session is recorded. But if you would like the slides separately, I'm happy to share a PDF of the slides at the end as well. Okay, I know that we already had my introduction, so I'm not going to add too much to it, except to say that I also love running. I do quite a lot of it, and I'm currently training for a marathon in October. And it's one of the things that helps me with like headspace and just general, I think is quite good fun. Yesterday I replaced it with a bike ride, so I do some other activities as well. And over in January, I started to crochet, which I'm really bad at. But I just needed something to keep my head from just going into overdrive. And I'm sure some of you have had the same with like the working from home and pandemic, all sorts of things going on. So for me, crochet really helped actually just occupy my head and my hands as well. So today we're going to look at your current writing base, and thanks to the people who have filled in the little pre-workshop activity. If you haven't done that, don't worry. It was just for me to kind of see, where you are with your writing, and then also to just have a look at, what you would like to get out of this workshop. I will share the link in the chat. Okay, so my door just went. I'm really sorry. Is that all right if I pop off 2 seconds?
It couldn't be any more fun than that. I'm sharing the link of the writer space that Stephanie mentioned, because I haven't done it either, so don't worry if you haven't. So it's a little, I think it's one page, I don't know if it's anymore, that asks some basic questions and, was it already? And assess at which level you are.
Sorry about that. And we're back. Typical, that obviously the door goes. So yes, so the link is to the actual test. I had some other questions in the pre-workshop activity, but that was mostly for my benefit when preparing. And then we're going to look at how to improve your writing base, and the letters in base stand for behavioral, artisanal, social, and emotional habits around your writing. And then there's time for questions at the end. As I said, I'm on annual leave, so I'm happy to stick around a little bit longer if there's anything you would like to know in more detail, or anything else you wanted to ask or chat about. So let's look at your writing base. And this is the kind of range of profiles you can get if you complete this test. And this was done with 450 people to get kind of this range of profiles by Helen Sword. There is a book that goes with this kind of test as well. It's called Air and Light and Time and Space. You don't necessarily have to buy the book. Some of the things we will talk about today are from the book. But if you're looking for a writing book, I found this one really interesting. It does talk about, or the tagline of the book is how successful academics write. And I was at the start, I was like, oh no, like success is, impact factors and I don't know, 20 papers a year and all that. But actually it's not. The first thing she explains is that success means different things to different people. And she goes into that a little bit in the book. So that's one book I really enjoyed reading about writing. to present. So the dots next to the profiles are the profiles that I got from people who filled in the test. So we had 2 people who had the Pebble profile, which is the most common profile. We had 4 people who had the Lone Wolf, and I was a little surprised by that, because that's one where people kind of tend to do a lot in solitary. However, if that is you, you're at the right course, because we're going to talk a little bit about how to maybe get more into community writing and sharing about your writing as well. Then we had the Wing and the Spinnaker as well. If you do fill in the little quizzes, 4 questions, you will get a profile, and there are some tips and tricks in there as well, and we will talk about some of them today as well. So hopefully that'll be easier for you, and you don't necessarily have to buy the book to find out more about how to come up with this. And this presentation today is also based on the book and looking at these 4 aspects of your writing. The first thing I wanted to say about this is that every writing base is different. It's your writing base. There is no right or wrong. It is a starting point, and it's just something for you to maybe think about some of the things. For example, the emotional aspect, for example, or the social aspect might be something you maybe not thought about of in relation to your writing. So before we start with looking at the base, I would like to do this little exercise with you, and someone will put you into breakout rooms for this. And I would like you to think about these 3 circles. So the first circle is the circle of control. And these are things that you are in control of. And I mean that you are really in control of. So for example, time, how you spend your time. Are you fully in control of that? Maybe, maybe not. How you feel about certain things, you're definitely in control of that. How you react to some things, you're in control of. So have a think about, in relation to your writing, what are you in control of? And then I would like you to think about all the things that are out of your control, but that influence you. So this is the circle of concern. So for example, the pandemic, it probably impacted you all in different ways, but there's nothing really you could have, done to not have it impact you. There are other things, family responsibilities, illness, a whole range of things, the relationship with your supervisor, or, certain things that are, how much teaching you have in a semester, or other people's priorities and how they maybe influence your priorities. And then there's a connecting circle between these 2. And this is the circle of influence. And these are mostly people. These are your networks. That could be peers, it could be your supervisor, it could be family. And the idea behind these networks and the circle of influence is that they're supposed to help you mitigate the impact of the circle of concern onto your circle of control. So for example, with the pandemic, how supportive was your supervisor to tell you it's okay if you're not feeling right, take time off. That is a very different, help than someone who's just basically expects you to produce exactly at the same level you did before the pandemic. So who is in your circle of influence? And are there maybe people that you would like to have in there? How could you approach them? So have a think about that. Sorry. So now having kind of some of the things you've discussed in the group, and I hope you found it helpful. I know from people, the most helpful about this exercise actually was the circle of concern, and openly sharing the things that are just out of your control. There's nothing you can do, and just having that, recognizing that and being okay with that. So, the pandemic, there's, if you feel overwhelmed, or if you, all sorts of things that happen, it's okay. And it is out of your control. So, it is okay to feel that way. You should try and maybe see ways of, coping. And that's really what it is. It's trying to cope and adapt. But it's totally okay to have certain things where just like, what, that's just, out of my control. And that's just how it has to be. And I know from especially the PhD students in the last year when I've done this course, that's been the most useful for them, is to recognize these things that they just don't have control over. So now looking at the different aspects of the base test. So I know you've been typing away already, but something you maybe want to add is the one word, if you can, that describes your current writing habits. So what are your writing habits like? I know some people who've already completed the test, what they might be like, but if you can sum it up in one word, please feel free to add it to the chat. And I definitely know mine are, it's just seen pop up irregular. Yep, that's good intentions, and then trying to, you know, the follow through, maybe not so good. So the first thing, and this is what is asked actually when you do the test, is your everyday writing habits are. And then you basically fill in from, like, you know, amazing to what writing habits. So one thing I wanted to share is that writing is a lot more than words on paper. You know, editing, sorting your references, checking your data, you know, if you're coding, checking your code, making graphs, making tables, you know, reading your work, other people's work. There's so much that we just class as writing. So one thing, and I've seen some people say that when they did the filled in the pre-workshop activities, well, try and separate actually the different things out for yourself, because it's so easy to put on your to-do list that you're going to write. But actually, before you add words to paper, maybe you have to read something, maybe you have to check a reference, maybe you have to make a table, maybe you have to analyze your data. And then by the end of it, you'll be like, oh, I didn't actually write, but you did all of these other things. So if you can for yourself, break down all the different aspects that go into writing and then have them as your tasks instead of one big writing task, break it down into these smaller bits. One thing that can really help is to track your writing. And I've seen a couple of people say that they tracked word count. So by the end of the day, they will, you know, tally up their words they have written. I would like, if that works for you, that's fine. If that doesn't work for you, you might want to try tracking the time you spend writing. And again, keep in mind, writing is all of the other things that go into, you know, an end product, which might be a journal paper, might be your thesis, could be a blog post, you know, whatever you're working on. So this writing tracker from Ellie Makin I quite like. So it says that the weekly goal is 25 times, and then it's blank. So you can add, you know, you can start with 10 minutes, you can start 15 minutes. If you have heard of the Pomodoro technique before, maybe you want to start, you know, with that 25 minutes, you know, an hour, but maybe you want to do less, maybe 7 times 1 hour, you know, whatever works for you. And then you add a reward, one for hitting your goal, and then one actually for exceeding your goal. And the reward prospect here is really important. And it is really important as well to recognize that when you achieve your goal, that is a success. It wasn't that the goal was too easy to reach. We can sometimes do that, and you've probably done that. You'd be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go, okay, I'll write 3 times this week, and you do it, and you're like, oh, actually I did it, so maybe I should have written 5 times. And before you know it, you're down in kind of a negative spiral and negative self-talk. So reward yourself and celebrate achieving your goals. And then once you've hit 3 times, you know, 25 times, for several weeks in a row, maybe you want to increase your goal, but don't go too hard on yourself first time round. And I will share the link in the chat box for this planner in a second. There are different ways to help you build this kind of behavioral habit, and regularity is kind of key, but also needs to be something that's sustainable. So some people go, you need to write every day, you know, you need to write for so much every day. I'm sure some of you are into exercising, into sport. You would never do that for a gym. Maybe once you're into it, but I don't think anyone really starts by seeing, you know, I need to go to the gym every day for an hour. You know already that that's not going to work. And it's the same for writing. So try and be realistic and sustainable. So Pomodoro is a great way to start with, you know, 25 minutes of writing time and then a 5-minute break. And there are some apps that can help with that. So there's the, you know, you can get a simple Pomodoro timer. You can get an alarm clock, you know, whatever, you know, your phone, you can set 25 minutes on your phone. The Planty app is quite nice because once you set your time and you can adjust the times, you can start with 10 minutes if 25 seems too long. And it grows a little plant as long as you don't, use your phone in those 25 minutes. And this can help with the motivation to try and stick to those times. There are some other apps available as well. There's also a sheet that has 100 Pomodoros in a month template, and it's basically 100 tomatoes, and you can just color them in as you do your Pomodoro. So there's a non-digital version as well. Something you might want to combine with the Pomodoro technique is what's called time blocking. These are bigger chunks of time, and that really depends on how much in control you are of your day-to-day. So for example, you might want to block a time, maybe let's say every Monday morning you want to write for 1 hour, maybe from 8 o'clock in the morning till 9, maybe before your workday starts. Make sure that if you do start at 8, that you also finish a bit earlier, because the important part is that this writing is part of your work. It's not on top of your work. But you might want to start a little bit ahead of other people so they don't fill your time with meetings or emails, all of that, when you maybe have a bit of free time in that sense of when other people work. You can do the same in the evening. And I highly recommend that you book that into your calendar. And I will share in a second a way to maybe help you be a bit more protective of your calendar as well. I'm exactly the same. I book my calendar, and then before I know it, a meeting pops up and I'm like, oh yeah, I just go to that meeting and I'll write later. And before I know it, I don't write at all that day, never mind that week. So to get around that is to write with others. And there's a whole range of things now that are available. And especially one of the, with everything moving online, there's a lot more virtual writing retreats. They don't work for everyone. I don't really like the full day retreats just because of the way my energy levels work. But I know they work for some people. There is one organized by a Scottish PhD student called Virtual Writing Retreats. I think they're £3 a session. There are others that are free. There's a PhD study room that's 24/7 on Zoom, so any time zone you can join them. Then I'm going to talk a little. Next slide, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Power Hour, which is a writing group that I host at my university, and that you could set up, for example, or with support from your institution, you could set up quite easily. And the other one is, which has a writing with others and the accountability in, is called FocusMate. This is basically a system where you register an account and you get 3 sessions a week. So 3 sessions a week free, and they're 50 minutes. You are paired with another FocusMate user, and you just book in a calendar, you just book a time slot. So if you want to write at Monday morning and Friday afternoon, you get paired with someone. You meet on a system similar to Zoom. It's through their website. You say a quick hello, you share what you're working on, then you get 50 minutes. And then at the end, you get a little ding ding timer. And then you come back and share how you got on. If you want to do more than the 3 sessions, you have to pay. It's, I think, about $5 a month. But actually for me, for example, the 3 sessions a week, which are free, have been perfect. So I do one Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and I do 8:30 till 9:20. And that's how I start basically my work day. And it's been really good with working from home because it gets me to my desk, because I sometimes can be quite bad, especially, for example, with the Olympics on. Before I know it, I watch a little bit of TV in the morning to catch up with the what's going on. And, before you know it, it's like 9:30, 10 o'clock. So having that kind of, knowing someone else is waiting for you can really help with that. If you're not entirely sure what kind of productivity method or approach helps, there's a quiz by Todoist, which is a task manager app, but you don't have to have the app to do their test. And it asks you questions around your work and, do you manage people? Are you being managed? Do you work on projects? Do you work on one thing at a time? And it's been quite accurate for people I've shared this with before when it comes up with like what they recommend. And it tells you a method you should try, and it also tells you how you can implement that method. And I'm just going to take a little break here so I can share some of those links. And some of the others I've mentioned, I don't think I have. Oh no, there they are. Sorry. There's also a group called Women in Academic Support Network, and they are on Facebook. And I'm just trying to see if I can get the link up to them. So it won't let me go onto. Can't move things 1 second. And this network on Facebook, so you have to fill in a little questionnaire so they can check that you are in academia, but it's open to, you know, PhD students, professors, a whole range. They actually have a group on FocusMate. So you can then join this group on FocusMate, and it means you will get matched from someone else from the support network. If they're all busy for whatever reason, then you get matched with another person. And you can say in your profile who you would like to get matched with, if you would like to be matched with anyone, or if you would like to basically be matched maybe just with women, for example. So let me just get the productivity quiz. 1 second, that's not on my. I normally have a link sheet, but as that one I forgot to add. Perfect. So this is the link to the productivity quiz. So just a couple of different things to try and help you, you know, get into basically a routine or a habit. And I would say the key thing is to make sure it's sustainable. So don't start with, you know, I'm going to write 3 hours every day. That's probably not going to last very long. But start small and then build. And with that, keep track of the different things you're trying, because if something doesn't work for you, don't try and push it. So if, for example, Pomodoro is too long or too short, eventually you'll be like, oh, actually, no, I tend to write in shorter time steps, or maybe I need a bit more time, and then adjust accordingly. One of the big things around writing and academic writing is to try and figure out what works for you. And unfortunately, there is no, you know, no right or wrong. It either works or it doesn't. And you might have to try different things to find out what that is. So the Power Hour, I just wanted to share quickly, and there's a webinar recording and a little bit of a blog post that goes with that, if you're interested in that. That's something I set up with a colleague about 2 years ago. It went fully online last year in April because of the pandemic, and actually since it went online, it just grew and grew. We have an academic writing team on Microsoft Teams, and within that we have a Power Hour channel. And me and my colleague who work for the university in, you know, our capacity of supporting staff and researchers, we organize these hours. So at the moment we have one every morning, which are unhosted. So it's just a time on the calendar, and people who come to the Power Hour kind of sort themselves out. And every Friday afternoon, we have one that's hosted. And the difference is that I'm there or my colleague, and we guide people through the process. It normally starts with a 10-minute check-in, and we will have a bit of a chit chat, and then we do share via the chat what we're going to do for the next hour. Then we write for 1 hour, but it really is up to, you know, people and what they want to do. We have people come, and staff use it for marking sometimes. People work on different aspects of their PhD, you know, data analysis. Some do come for writing. We had one member of staff who was like going to say, you know, said they're going to write, and then at the end of the session when we did the follow-up was like, actually I just used this time to think and plan. And it was just so nice to have that hour headspace where you can easily ignore your, maybe not easily, more easily ignore your emails, for example. And the nice thing as well is because you know this group is waiting for you, if you do get sidetracked by the door buzzing, or maybe you did have a peek at your emails, you then get this reminder, it's like, oh no, everybody else is writing as well. I should get back to, you know, whatever my goal was. And our research shows that the 3 key things that people like about this setup is the accountability, also making writing legitimate part of your workday. It shouldn't happen, in the evenings. It shouldn't happen on the weekend. Academic writing is such a big part of your work. It should happen in your 9 to 5, 8 to 4, whatever your working patterns are. It shouldn't happen in addition to that, which is why we are adding this hour into a normal work schedule. It also helps people protect the time. So as I said before, if I put in the hour myself and then a meeting pops up, I'm like, oh yeah, that's fine, I'll just go to that meeting. But because this hour is scheduled by us, a university institution, people tend to be a little bit more protective of that hour as well. And then there's the added bonus of a community. So we meet regularly online, you get to know people. There's people that, that I've met through this writing group that I've never met before. And I don't know if I would have met them actually if it wouldn't have been for this writing group as well. So this is something that could be set up by yourself as a peer group, or something you might want to chat with, if you have a similar institute or similar service at your institution that is an academic development unit, which UWS Academy is, or a researcher development unit. So for example, where I'm based now, research services, and we see that as part of our offering. We don't just do webinars, we also host these writing courses. The other thing that can help with the writing is to get started. And with that, you might want to start with a plan. So there's this academic toolkit website. I highly recommend you have a look. They do a lot more than this article design canvas. They have research design canvas, there's planners, and there's a whole range of different things. The article design canvas is really great when you want to get started with a journal paper, especially maybe for the first time. They have updated this planner a little bit, but it's really nice to just have, you can use it as a PDF, print it out, or you can fill it in if you have the right PDF software, for example, as well. And then alongside that, you might want to also spend a little bit of time reflecting on your writing and planning ahead on your writing. As I said, that can help you figure out what's working and what isn't working for you. And I will share those links in the chat as well for you. So moving on to the artisanal habits. So this is basically how skillful are you as an academic writer? And again, that could be subjective. How do you, how skillful do you think you are? But also, how skillful do your supervisors think you are, or co-authors? And there is a bit of a debate every now and then popping up on social media around how much correction should there be. Just because someone doesn't write the way you write, then is it okay for you to be like, no, you should write it this way because that's how I like to read it? And it can be a little bit tricky because you want to develop your own style, but there are certain things where people think that is what writing should look like or feel like, and it can be a little bit tricky to navigate that. There are a couple of books that I can recommend. So Air and Light and Time and Space by Helen Sword, which the base test is kind of linked to, and that's I really enjoyed reading that. There is also Getting Published by Gina Whisker. Then there's another Helen Sword book, Stylish Academic Writing. And then Rowena Murray has published a lot as well, writing for academic journals. She also has a very popular book around how to write a thesis, for example. And you might want to check with your institution's library if they have these books available. If you do want to buy a book, I would recommend the Air and Light and Time and Space book. I really enjoyed that one. There are also a whole range of blogs online. Raul Pacheco Vega is basically, that's like my go-to normally whenever someone asks about something. His resources are absolutely fantastic. Ellie doesn't really do that much at the moment. She's on maternity leave, but her academic writing blog posts from the past are still really valuable as well. And so are the other blogs here, and I will share the links to all of them as well. And then the other one that can really help is to actually practice by editing work. So you might want to work with, peers, or maybe other PGRs, other PhD students, colleagues, Maybe you want to write for other media. So for example, blog writing can really help you with your own style. Obviously, it's a little bit different writing a blog to a journal, but just getting used to, how you start a project, how you organize a project, and then how you kind of, how you feel about writing as well. Blog writing can really help with that. And you can also write just for yourself and don't necessarily have to share it. And with that, you might want to see actually if there are any other things that your institution offers. Are there any workshops or webinars or resources that are available through your institution if you then can't find them online? But there's a whole range of things available online as well. And with the course coming up about how to read scientific papers, for example, have a look at when you're reading work that you're going to reference or not. And then just try and keep a note of what you liked about a paper. Why was that one easy to read? What stood out? Was it the way they structured it? Was it the way it flowed? Was it certain words they used? And try and keep a little mental note. And it's totally okay to copy the style of other writers. Obviously, you can't, copy the text because that's plagiarism. However, you can copy the style of other writers if you like it, and then combine that with your own style of writing as that develops. So if you have any top tips, any books, any blogs, or any other resources that really helped you, it'd be great if you could share them via the chat. I'm always interested to know as well what other people have found online. I mean, the internet is so vast these days. There are so many great resources out there, and it's always good to know what has helped other people, and then I can add that to my own little resource library as well. I'm sure others would benefit from knowing, where do you go? What's your go-to blog, for example, or what is a book about writing that really helped you? It'd be great if you could share that. And I know it says 5 minutes, but just with an eye on time, I'm just going to let you do that. Hopefully you can type while I keep talking. So the next one is the social habits. And that one asks, I engage in productive conversations about my writing and my work in progress. So how do you feel about talking about your writing? How is your writing going? Is that a question where you go, don't ask me, I don't want to talk about it? Do you only share when things are going well? Do you only share products that are finished? Or do you let others take part in the process of your writing? So where are you on the spectrum? Do you keep your thoughts about writing to yourself? Or do you openly share, how your writing is going and how the whole progress and process is going? One thing to keep in mind with that is that the more you share about the process, maybe you found that when you talked about those 3 circles, is people will share similar things. They tend to struggle with the same things, but we don't really ever get taught how to write. I definitely didn't get taught how to write. I was supposed to just pick it up as I went, using the feedback I got from my supervisor to make me a better writer. And that's one of the reasons why I do this workshop, but I also have a longer writing course where I guide people through the different stages of writing and different aspects of writing as well. Because I think often we just assume people will just somehow, absorb it. I don't really know how or why we think that. And the other one is people don't really get exposed to the process of writing. All you ever see is the published journal paper, it's the published book, it's the essays students submitted. But people don't often see the 50 drafts it took to get there, the amount of frustration, the deleting words just to then a week later add the same words again. And one of the things that can really help when we talk about, this process, and I've definitely seen it in the Power Hour, where we have regular writers come and openly share, and maybe not at the start, but as they got to know each other, they will tell you when something is just not going well or they're stuck. And then the nice thing that comes from that is that people then have tips. how they overcame writer's block. What technique, for example, Pomodoro or any other technique helped them. And that is kind of the nice thing around this community. You don't necessarily have to share it in as a bigger group as, for example, a power hour. It could just be between you and a group of peers, between you and your supervisor, you and a critical friend. But I guarantee you, just being or trying to be a little bit more open about how your writing is going when it's not going that well. You'll be surprised how many people will have had the same experience. And once you start to share, it just makes it easier for others to share as well. So with that, one of the things to keep in mind is that everyone struggles with their writing at some point. People tend to struggle at different points. So there's some people who struggle to get started and they just look at that blank page and that's just, overwhelming and then not sure about how to add words. Perfectionism can get really in the way of that people sometimes think as soon as my keyboard adds word or my fingers hit the keyboard and it adds words to the page, it has to be perfect. You might find yourself doing that, you delete words as you're typing. One way around that is editing as part of your writing process. So, and you can't edit a blank page. So try and get away from everything has to be perfect the first time. And that's why a draft is called a draft. And in my head, things are called draft till they're published. And even then you will still find, mistakes and things in it as well. Then there's people like me who really, have no bother starting at all, but they really struggle to get it finished. And there's just something about it having to share it at the end where I'm just still not quite, I don't want other people to tell me if it's, bad or how to improve it because I've spent so much time on it. And so I do have a lot of started projects, but quite a lot of unfinished projects as well. There's support available, check with your institutions. There might be writing groups already happening. I know at UWS, we have a lot of actually groups that the PhD students set up themselves. And sometimes you might just have to ask around to find out about them. There are these virtual retreats and some of them are built around this community aspect and some of them are a little bit more just for support at that time. So for example, with the focus mate sessions, you might meet a different person every time, but sometimes you might have the same person for more than one session as well, or something like the power hour that is really based at an institution can help as well. There's also social media, and I mentioned some of the hashtags already. So ACRI, Academic Writing, ACRIMO, Academic Writing Month, which is in November. But there's also Academic Chatter and PhD Chat, and a lot of people follow these hashtags and you can reach a large audience. And even if you don't want to necessarily ask something, if you have a look for those hashtags, you can see what other people talk about as well. And then you might find yourself actually seeing a question that you also had, and then you can see all the responses. And it's a really supportive network in a way, especially around these hashtags. So the last of the base test is your emotional habits. And the question for that is, when you think about your academic writing, how do you feel? And there are a whole range of emotions that go with writing, and it might depend on if it is academic writing, if it is fun writing, free writing, blog writing. There's so many different things associated with writing as well. So maybe you enjoy the data analysis and the crunching numbers or finding themes, or maybe not so much to then having to write it up. Also the sharing, once it is written, it has to be shared as well. So one of the things to maybe try next time you're writing, have a bit of paper, and before you start writing, just take a note in how you're feeling in that moment. You're about to start. Like, what do you feel like? Are you anxious? Overwhelmed? Are you actually looking forward to it? There's a whole range, obviously, that's available. And again, there's no right or wrong, but take a note of your feelings at that time. Depending on how long you're writing for, maybe halfway through, just have another check-in point. Just be like, how am I feeling now that I've written a little bit, I got into the groove maybe. And then at the end of your allocated time slot, check in again. How are you feeling now that you've done this writing? And you will often feel that you're anxious and nervous, maybe a little bit overwhelmed to get started. But once you're in it, that eases a little bit. And then by the time you're finished, you might even be relieved it's over, but you might also be, happy that you actually managed to write. You might be quite pleased with what you have written. And then these are things you can use next time round. So next time you're going to sit down to write, remember the feeling you had at the end, and that will help you get into the groove a little bit faster. And as you build the habits and get used to this writing, hopefully it'll just get quicker and quicker for you to get into this routine and into these habits. And this is where having a sustainable habit can really make a difference. I recommend that you find time slots that work for you. And if that is one a week for 20 minutes, that's fine. But try and stick to that time slot. Don't rely on when you feel like it. As I said earlier, for example, I'm a runner. I do have a training plan. There's plenty of times where I don't want to go running, but I know once I'm out, the hardest step is out the door. But once I'm out, especially once I'm back, I know, I feel better for it. I feel, I've done something. And it is because I have these regular time slots. So I know the days I'm going running: Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday. And that's just when I, have to go different lengths. But these are my days. And this can eventually, you can convert that into a writing routine as well. But keep in mind something that you can, stick to long term. And going back to our behavioral habits, think about rewards for yourself. And they don't have to necessarily be big rewards. It can be, having a bubble bath, going for coffee with a friend, whatever. It's just to have a point where you'll be like, okay, I achieved this, and now I'm going to reward myself. And the way around that is that actually eventually your brain will look for these rewards, and that will make it easier to stick to the routine, but also to get away from this negative self-talk I talked about earlier, where like, oh yeah, that was so easy to reach, maybe you just didn't aim high enough. Everybody can write 3 times a week. So try and get away from that, really stick to the rewards, and really try and start small and then build on that. And then the other one, especially around the emotional side, is try and find ways to make writing fun. And I don't know if you've come across the Written Kitten website. I absolutely love this page. You can also pick puppies or rabbits. There's also a special way of adding any other animal you like. So if you like dinosaurs, you can add them as well. This is a blank word editor. You can't really do anything. You can't change font size. You can't change any of those things. You will have to copy your text out into Word later on. The nice thing about that is you can't get distracted by all of these kind of stylish things that you should do at the end anyway. But it also plays into the reward system. So you set yourself a word count. So in this example, we're going for kittens, and every 100 words. And then what Written Kitten does, it rewards you with a picture of a cat every 100 words. So every 100 words is a new cat. You can set the word count to 200 words, 500 words, I think is the highest. And as I said, you can also pick puppies or bunnies if you prefer that. And it's really kind of a fun way to get used to writing for a certain amount of time without having to worry about correcting or editing. And it has that little reward system in there, and you'll be surprised how quickly you can kind of get excited to see another cat, and then maybe how quickly you can get to the next 500 words or 100 words. You might not maybe use this for all of your writing, but it might be something you want to try to get into a habit and to just help you write for a certain amount of time. Maybe when you're doing a certain style of writing, maybe you want to try free writing, where you just kind of write maybe for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, and whatever pops into your head. Maybe you just want to, start to get your first 100 words on and then move to Word, for example. But it's just something to maybe to try and play around with. If you think the kittens and puppies and bunnies are too nice, there are some other versions that will basically work with punishment. So there's fighter's block, where the more you write, you basically have a little fighter that fights another person. And basically the more you write, the better you'll fight. Then there's write or die. That's probably the worst one, in a sense that once you stop writing for a certain amount of time, because you're pausing, you're thinking about something, for example, it starts deleting things you have written. So if you just want to practice being able to write in one go for 20 minutes, 10 minutes, then this is the one that you might want to try. The other one is the writing prompts as well. That's something you can try, and just basically if you're stuck or not, it'll ask you a question, and then you can use that to just help you kind of kickstart your writing as well. And I will just try and find the links for that, and I will share them. And I think the written kitten link is not here, but you can just, if you search for written kitten, you should be able to find it. And then hopefully the fun aspect can also come from writing for other media. So as I said, blog writing, for example, but also writing with others. So the the virtual writing retreats or meeting with someone to write together for a while can really help as well. So going back to the chat box, if any of you would like to share, how are you making writing fun or less scary, I said, and have you noticed how your feelings have changed over time for writing, or you're still in the this is all overwhelming, anxious, perfectionism, or on the other end, imposter syndrome, where you think your writing is never good enough, and is there anything that you've come across that that helped you, any either particular writing retreats or any other resources that you found helpful? And again, just be nice, I think, for others to see, what has worked for you, and they might find that helpful as well. So before I finish, just wanted to add some final thoughts for today's session, and something for you to keep in mind. Find out what works for you. There is no right or wrong. You can read all the books, you can read all the blogs, you can make up all the plans, you can follow, other people's plans. But keep in mind that if something doesn't work, it's okay to ditch it and replace it with something else. And this is where the keeping track and reflecting really can be handy. A lot of you are, trained in research and science and all different aspects. If the data tells you it's not working, you probably be more likely to ditch it. And this is where this can really help, because it's not just, oh, I think it's not working. You will have the proof that it is or isn't working, and that can really help make a decision that maybe Pomodoro isn't quite right for you. Maybe writing every day isn't working. Maybe and once you have that kind of, in a way, that evidence, you can then make decisions, and that will hopefully help get over some of the things that might so far maybe be holding you back, for example. I definitely recommend talking and sharing with others, and not just the successes, but how writing as a process looks like for you. What do you consider writing, when you're stuck? Also, if something was really helpful that helped you get unstuck or helped you with writer's block, for example. Try and find a support group, and it doesn't have to be a giant group. It could be, some Twitter friends. It could be a little WhatsApp group. It could be something like the Women's Network on Facebook. It could be maybe something from your institution as well. If it's not there, maybe there's interest to set something up. It's worth having an ask around as well. Also try new things. So maybe you've had certain things that you were like, this is what people tell me works. You've tried it, it's not quite working. So hopefully some of the things I've shared today, you've either haven't tried yet or haven't heard about, you might want to give a try. And again, try and keep track and reflect. And read and review other people's work. There's so much to be learned from reading, obviously finished papers as well, but also reading other people's drafts and then giving feedback on those drafts can really, really help for you to understand what works, what doesn't work, and how to improve on writing as well. If you can be involved in the, obviously, the peer review process, then that's great as well, but you can do it informally in a smaller group as well. So just to summarize today's session, so we talked about the circles of control, concern, and influence. We explored writing habits and how to develop these, and maybe, you know, talked about different aspects. We looked at tools that can help with our writing and to improve some of those habits. And hopefully you found the discussions in the breakout rooms really helpful as well, where you also shared, you know, your experience with other writers as well, and maybe, you know, shared even some tips and tricks, and some people have shared things via the chat as well. That's been really helpful. So thanks for everyone who's done that. And that's everything from me. If you have any questions, if there's anything you would like to find out more about, I'm happy. I know we ran a little bit over time, but I'm happy to stick around for a little bit if there are any questions or anything else. And that's it. Thank you.